Hey guys, welcome back to Mr. Saul Talking, everyone's favorite web show. I don't even know what this is. This is a podcast, a web show? Someone's gonna have to determine that for me. So, today is Wednesday. It's kind of weird because I don't see you, even though typically I would. But hopefully we have a result for the election, or at least have a projected result for the election. So today, what I want to do in not such a long time is essentially run through the end of World War One, just talking about the Treaty of Versailles and comparing that to what President Wilson at the time sought, which was called his 14 points. There will be three questions here, mainly reviewing the homework, just kind of expanding on those key things in the homework and looking at a political cartoon. So let's just jump into this. So you guys read last night or before then, about the 14 points. And thinking about the end of the war, essentially, with the end of the war, with the addition of the American forces in Europe, as well as, really just the inability of the Germans to really fight any longer, and the civil unrest in Germany at the end of World War One, the war comes to an end in November of 1918. I almost said 2018. That doesn't make sense. The war comes to an end on November 11th of 1918, referred to as Armistice Day, which is now actually Veterans Day. But essentially, President Wilson is seeking world peace with the end of the war. World War One was often called the war to end all wars, and Wilson idealistically believes that he has created this brilliant set of ideas and policies that are going to benefit the world. In the cartoon to the right, you can kind of see this is somebody who's projecting this concept, and he's a composer, I guess, playing a concerto or whatever, with all these nations involved. And the question asks, can he produce the harmony? And we'll talk about, obviously, kind of spoiler alert, he doesn't, but essentially the 14 points lays out some basic things. No secret alliances, because that was a big cause of World War One in Europe. Freedom of the seas, which of course was a big reason why the U.S. got involved in the war. Supporting free trade, which he believes would be beneficial, and we'll talk more about this. With World War II, it'd be more beneficial if countries that trade together will not fight. Preventing militarization of countries, which was a big cause of the war in Europe. He essentially makes this point that imperialism is bad, but keep in mind, the United States was engaging in imperialism during this time period. And essentially, Wilson had to say about imperialism was, we should be limiting countries doing imperialism, but we need to keep in mind the wants of those countries and territories being taken over and the nations that are doing the imperializing. It's not like he went out there and said England and France and America, the United States, were evil countries. He was essentially saying that imperialism is something we should start avoiding, and this was a place where he was trying to essentially promote the idea of self-determination, which is that territories and nationalities should be able to determine for themselves what kind of country they want. And truly, Wilson's largest and most important goal was his last goal, which was global cooperation, that the world needed to come together to solve crises before they turned into war. And that idea was essentially the League of Nations. So this is Wilson's big idea of what he hopes for. And when he comes to France, and where you have the meetings in Paris and Versailles, he's essentially sitting down with the major Allied forces that won the war. You have the Prime Minister of England and Italy, and you have the French Premier, along with Woodrow Wilson there. This is before he had a stroke and before he was kind of debilitated in the last couple of years, last 6 months or so of his presidency. But obviously, he's coming in with a lot of high idealistic expectations, which are very different than what the other three major leaders in this discussion have to say. As you guys read, the Treaty of Versailles is far different than the 14 points. Essentially, the Treaty of Versailles completely blames Germany for the war. It essentially not only forces them to accept blame, but it also forces them to pay billions and billions of dollars. I think the final amount was $33 billion, which would cripple the country of Germany, as we'll talk about leading up to World War II. But it does listen to Wilson on two key things. It listens to Wilson's idea of the League of Nations, which, as you read, is ironically something that the United States does not join, and I'll get back to that in a second. So the League of Nations is created through the Treaty of Versailles, and there is new nations that are established as a result of the Treaty of Versailles and temporary colonies that were established in the Middle East. Really quickly, before I jump to the first of the questions, if you look at a map here on the left side, you have the Allied forces and the Central Powers. During World War One, and what was the results after the war. So if you notice, places like countries like Germany lost a lot of land, both to the French, and then also with the creation of Poland. Russia's losing land. There's many Eastern European countries in the north, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, that are created. East Prussia is created. You have essentially the Austro-Hungarian Empire broken up. Czechoslovakia is created as a new nation. I'm not going to bore you with all these details. You can obviously see that there is a lot of changes that are going on to Europe, and we'll talk more about this as it relates to World War II. If you look at the Middle East, where you had the Ottoman Empire involved, you have the creation of modern-day Turkey, but mainly most of the modern Middle East is formed into colonies, or what they called mandates, that were controlled by the British and the French. And if you wonder why there might be instability in the Middle East to this day, or why Middle Eastern nations are frustrated by European and American involvement in their countries, that's because there's been a long history of European and United States involvement in these countries. So at the end of World War One, for example, the Ottoman Empire, man, that was a weird misspeak. The Ottoman Empire is broken up, and you have the creation of what are essentially temporary colonies, or what the British and the French and the Italians call mandates. And many of these countries wouldn't gain independence until far after World War One. Egypt in 1922, Iraq in 1932. Syria 46, Turkey, yada yada yada. I don't want to go on and on, but you get the idea. But one question I did want to have you think about is thinking about the 14 points and what ultimately we know happened, which is that World War II happens. I want you guys to think back to your freshman year when you did learn about World War II, and hopefully you guys have like a decent idea of what did occur there in the chaos that was the years between World War One and World War II. My question is, knowing what you do know about World War II, do you think that the world would have been better off adopting Wilson's 14 points? I asked you guys in the homework a question along the lines of which of the 14 points would have been most effective in preventing future war. But in thinking about Wilson's 14 points, the elimination of secret alliances and the free trade proposal and the lack of militarization, do you think that those things would have prevented a World War II? Or do you think that maybe World War II was inevitable? Do you think that his policies or his beliefs were effective, or at least good ideas, is really what I'm asking? Or would the world have been a better place if we just actually listened to Wilson? The second question that I had has to do with a political cartoon. So this political cartoon, which is called The Gap and the Bridge, dates back to just about 1918, 1919 in the United States. It's an American cartoon. And the cartoon is obviously commenting on the League of Nations, which ironically the United States did not join. Many senators who would vote on the Treaty of Versailles, because if you know a little bit about the Constitution, you need 2/3 support by the U.S. Senate in order for a treaty, international treaty, to be adopted by the United States. And the Treaty of Versailles very critically included President Wilson's League of Nations. And as you remember from the reading, the United States ultimately never did join the League of Nations. So if you look at this cartoon, I'm not going to give you the answer, but looking at this cartoon, what do you think is the cartoonist's intention? Thinking about the DBQ and direct analysis, I want you guys to be practicing thinking about intent. What is the point of view and purpose of this cartoon? What is this cartoonist trying to suggest about the United States and the League of Nations? What do you think is the cartoonist's intention in creating this cartoon in a couple of sentences? And then lastly, my last question before I bore everyone to tears is, um, in general, do you think that the United States is better off isolated from world affairs, or do you think that the United States is better off being more deeply involved in international affairs? So, I asked this question because at the end of World War One, of course, there was a lot of debate in the country about what kind of country we were going to be compared to the rest of the world in relationship to the rest of the world. You know, are we going to be an isolated country that avoids conflicts and international crises, or are we going to be the kind of country that is going to be a global leader in trying to bring countries together or being very involved in international affairs? And of course, as we'll discuss, the isolationists, the people who support isolation, ultimately end up kind of winning this debate for about 15 to 20 years before World War II. But I am curious in general, what do you guys think? I don't just mean in terms of World War One. I just mean in all of how we posture ourselves to the rest of the world as a country. Do you think we're better off isolated, or do you think we're better off being more deeply involved and being a global leader? So try to offer an example from US history. It doesn't have to be something we talked about in class. I'm just asking in general for your opinion towards this question. So I hopefully didn't take up too much time. I know that I ranted and raved. Good word, Saul. That I ranted and raved there at the end, but I will talk to y'all on Monday, and we'll be in touch. Please email me if you guys have any questions. Hope to see you guys soon. Bye.